Welcome to Robotics and Automation News webinars, where you can be part of a global event without leaving your home or office. Attend our live webinars and communicate directly with influential professionals in your industry.
Hello, my name is Abdul Montakim. I'm editor of robotics and automationnews.com. In this interview, I speak to John Hayes, Director of Sales at Balyo, a robotics company specializing in autonomous warehouse vehicles. Balyo is mainly a software development and integration company, but has many well-known hardware manufacturers as its partners, such as Yale and Linde, as John explains.
My name is John Hayes. I'm the Director of Sales for Balyo here in the Americas. And my role is to grow direct and integrator sales here in the United States.
And tell us a bit about Balyo itself.
Sure. Balyo is started out as a software company in the mid 2000s and has grown into a one of the premier AGV companies. It's based in France with offices all around the world, so we have a worldwide coverage. We deliver automated solutions in the form of AGVs and AMRs, generally at the base level, moving product from point A to point B autonomously, especially in this time frame, concentrating on helping not just with ROI, but also offset some of the issues with labor shortages.
Right. What I'll do is I'll share my screen and show the Balyo website, and we can carry on talking about the company and its products. As you said, it's a French company, so I imagine that Europe is its main customer base. I don't know if it has customers in different parts of the world. I imagine it does, but tell us about the kind of companies you've been dealing with and their geographical spread.
Sure. Well, like you said, Balyo is a French company. Most of the AGV acceptance has come from Europe, even over the years. The US has just become a much more accepting area for automation. And I think mostly because early on, the ROI paradigm in Europe was easier to deal with than the one in the United States. So the expectations in the US have always been 12 months to 18 months to get an ROI hurdle rate. Europe's always been a bit better, mostly I think because you're dealing with smaller footprints, less space. So there were more drivers than what we had in the United States. However, the things are changing, and the growth of automation, AGVs and AMRs is starting to become prolific all over the world. So we're doing projects in Singapore and the Far East, as well as obviously Europe. I think our biggest customer base is in Europe, but we're growing very quickly in the United States. As a company, we've been in the United States for many years, but we have not had a direct sales channel. So that's really my role within Balyo, is to grow the direct sales channel and to grow the integrator channel. Our history has been one of going to market through OEMs, and those OEMs in the US would be Hyperlocal Group as well as Linde. Linde is one of our primary OEMs in Europe. Hyperlocal Group has been our primary OEM here in the US, but we're growing that a fair amount. We're bringing over some different vehicle types from Linde here to the States, mostly to address a need around the growth of distribution. So, the last time we talked about the Amazon effect and how much product was being purchased and shipped rather than going to a brick and mortar store. And we're seeing that more and more. And the Linde product line gives us a reach truck, which allows us to operate in a narrow aisle, which has been very difficult for most AGV companies. We're we're in that 10-foot, 9-foot, 6-inch aisle, as well as the Linde product also gives us a VNA option. So as a company now, we have product that can fit everything from a pallet jack to a tugger to a standard counterbalance forklift, all the way up to reach trucks and VNAs. So what I'm really excited about Balyo is the fact that we can automate from the dock door all the way into put away, down to picking, from full pallets to partial pallets, and then back out to the dock door without having to just break up islands of automation. So for all intent and purposes, we're moving to more of a lights out concept. Now, we're not there yet. I don't think the industry is there quite yet. But conceptually, we're moving that way fairly quickly. I think everyone in this industry is.
I'm looking at, as you can see, I'm looking at the product range, and there's quite a lot of products here listed. I'm just going to go to the VNA and MR
Sure.
now, but some of these seem to be replacement for the traditional forklift truck, which is, traditionally been operated by a human. And that is a market that I've been expecting to diversify and grow for quite some years. I mean, I've been doing this website for about 5 years, and in the last 3 years, I've been expecting it to really take off. And I don't know when, maybe I missed it, but I've noticed them more now, these driverless forklift trucks. But tell me about them and how they are possibly replacing. Are they directly replacing, in your experience, in your day-to-day work? Are they replacing human-driven systems, or is it brand new warehouses that are looking at implementing driverless forklift trucks, or how is it?
Sure.
How are these driverless forklift trucks making their way into the market?
Well, I think that if you look at the longer time period, it has been brownfield or facilities that have or are replacing or moving people off of forklifts and moving more to automation. And going back far enough, it was always a straight line calculation for ROI. So the long term would be, I could buy an automated vehicle for $100,000, but I know that I have to pay a person X number of dollars. Let's just say in the US, it's $50,000 a year. The straight line calculation would be a 2-year ROI. And that was the motivator for moving people out of a repetitive job, like, and possibly a non-rewarding job, like riding a forklift all day long, into something that's more mutually beneficial for both sides, as well as then creating an ROI for that specific application. If you think about it, 50% of a forklift driver's time is typically non-value added because they're not moving anything. They're driving to one spot to pick up something and then moving that, but then driving back empty. So if you can take an automated solution and replace that non-value add, of course, you get additional benefit, but that is not the warm fuzzy that we're looking for. So yes, and historically, it has all been about ROI or displacing workers and moving them to a different position. But it had the growth of distribution centers, and some of this is driven, and maybe most of it is driven by the restrictions on over-the-road drivers, and the amount of time that they can drive per day has kind of built up a paradigm of putting distribution centers closer to cities, so that there is a much shorter travel time between distribution and the customer base. And that means that many more distribution centers have been popping up. So most of what we see now is greenfield. So we're working with a lot of integrators and 3PL companies to deliver these products. And it's not necessarily based on ROI any longer. It's now based on availability of labor. I took a trip just recently to visit a customer, and every building, I wouldn't say every building, but many buildings that I drove by, whether they were manufacturing or distribution, had big banners on the outside that said now hiring. And every company that I go in talks about their inability to get labor. And then worse than that, their ability to get it, but then lose it because the forklift drivers or their labor pool is being drawn away by another competitor down the street that's paying them a little bit more here and there. So it's become less and less about displacing people and more about creating an automated solution that's not dependent on whether your workers come into work or whether you can get them. Which is good. And why is that good? It's because it allows growth in other areas of companies. And I believe in many cases it allows for those folks who were on forklifts who may, I mean, you know, it is in some cases a brain numbing job. You drive back and forth all day long. We're in some facilities that are 2 million square feet. These folks are driving, you know, a quarter mile from one end to the other. And after a while, you just, you know, your mind is not in what you do. So the benefits of giving them another role in the facility while a company grows is good for both sides. So we are seeing a bit of both brownfield still, certainly, as well as greenfield applications. And I think that's good because it indicates growth. And, you know, the downside, of course, is that brick and mortar may be less and less. But it does, certainly if you want something quickly, you purchase it online, you get it very quickly. And in some small degree, we're part of that. I think that one of the...
Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah, no worries at all. I think that one of the things that we have seen, and that has led to the Linda product line becoming more prevalent for us in the US is because of that 3PL and the warehousing and distribution space. And you're actually looking at it on the screen right there. And that's the VNA and the reach truck. Those are very difficult applications. And our technology is such that our guidance allows us to operate in a very narrow aisle with a very narrow aisle vehicle, but also in a very narrow aisle, meaning in a narrow aisle. But we get to a 9-foot 6-inch aisle, which is very narrow for most narrow aisles. I know that's confusing, but most narrow aisles or reach trucks operate in a 10-foot or wider space, where our reach truck can operate in a little bit narrower space. The real benefit for us is that with the growth of these greenfield sites, we can help constrict a little bit the amount of space required. They're not making it any longer. A building is a building. So, you know, the more rack you can put in or the more storage space, the better. But that truck is an incredible piece of equipment. And the technology behind it with the SLAM guidance and our ability to operate in those narrow aisles is really a game changer for us. And we're really concentrating right now on warehousing and distribution because of this. And I think that the message is compelling because we don't just stay either in the aisle or transport from the dock to an end cap or end of aisle. And that's what most companies will do in automation. But we have the ability to really do the entire facility, which is really nice with this vehicle as well as a VNA truck.
I'm looking at a video now, and yeah, it's a very interesting piece of technology. I'm still just one last thing about human drivers of forklift trucks. I have a tendency to look at the logical conclusion of something.
Sure.
The logical conclusion of this technology is forklift driving as an activity, occupation, profession, if you like, is on the way out, really. I mean, I don't know how many forklift truck drivers are going to be displaced in a given time scale, but whatever the time scale is, this kind of technology is going to make a lot of them redundant, and probably it's going to be gone. I don't know what situation or scenario, there would be requirements for human-driven forklift drivers when you've got
Well,
such levels of sophistication with these driverless forklifts.
yeah, things are changing. But I think that the numbers don't necessarily represent in total a huge impact to date. So the forklift market is still huge. So there are millions of forklifts sold every year. The percentage of automated fork trucks or automated pieces of equipment, whether AGV or AMR, is growing still slowly, but certainly the eventuality is that when you can find a way to replace, I don't know, let's say 75% of what a human can do on a fork truck, then I think that you'll see more and more adoption. I think the one key thing to back up your thought exercise is that we're seeing more and more forklift OEMs entering into the market. So not just with a company like Balyo automating the Linda or the HYG trucks, but you're also seeing other companies, Raymond, Toyota, Crown, those guys also getting into the AGV market. So I think that does definitely back up your comment that the eventuality is that there will be a time where more AGVs versus people on fork trucks. I think that's a ways out. And I think that's because there are still processes within any operation, whether it's manufacturing or distribution, that requires a fair amount of logic and brain power. So people have to think through situations as they do their day-to-day work that you can't necessarily plan for today. So, you hear things like AI-powered AGVs and AMRs. They exist. Certainly they exist. But the ability for that software to think through today, the amount of situations that could occur is still not quite there. And I think it's probably years off. I used to work with a very smart guy, actually the founder of an AMR company. And even he believed that the total impact of AI is probably still a ways off. But there will always, I believe, be applications where AGVs and AMRs are not necessarily perfect fits for. And I think most of that's because you can't build a perfect Swiss Army knife with a piece of equipment, whereas a human can figure out in some ways how to utilize a tool. I mean, we've been doing it for millennia. But you build a specific tool and then have it do specific things via software. And it becomes difficult to do everything that you need it to do. However, we're getting there. I think that a good highlight to that is the blue sky applications of truck loading and truck unloading are becoming more and more prevalent. Still difficult to do because there are constraints on how you load trucks and how you unload them, things like pinwheeling, whether you load out or cube out a truck. And the thought that goes into understanding how the pallets are in the truck, understanding how to get them out or how to put them in, pinwheeling and those things. That thought process is something right now that's best handled by a human. But I think in the future, there will be a point where automation will be able to do it. Certainly sensor packages exist, but it's much slower. And is that trade-off viable? And I would say that today, probably not, simply because this is what we see. This is what I see, I think. You see customers who buy this equipment, there's three levels. There's a C level who is looking 10 years down the road thinking this is where it's going to go. It's similar to your thought process. And then you have, your VP director level, operations level that, both have an eye on the 10-year plan, but also have responsibility for making a plant run today. And then you have the plant folks whose only job is to make sure that they get the product that they build or ship out the door. So you have to think of all of those things. And many companies will look towards the C-level concept and sell a technology that's potentially not ready to meet the demands of the plant level. That's okay, as long as you understand what you're getting into. But at the end of the day, what we really see most of the time, or I guess what I should say, what I see most of the time, is the folks in the plant really only care that a pallet moves. They really don't care how it moves. They just want it to move every time where they want it to go from, where they want it to go to, and they don't want to have to deal with problems associated with it. And of course, those problems range from installation problems to integration problems, so how things work, how they talk to each other, to does it work over the long term? Does the hardware and software continue to operate as it should after it's been installed? So, there's this paradigm of what does the long term look like versus the short term, and who wants what. And I think today it's still a bit risky to bite off more than you can chew with technology, just for the sake of technology. So you really have to buy into a product that you can put your hands on and that moves things reliably. And that's always been the messaging for the AGV guys. It's been that way for ages. We can show it to you. We can take you someplace. We can let you put your hands on it. You can talk to people. And I think today that's more important. However, in the long term, you need people who are pushing the technology envelope with sensors and software and AI, and those folks are out there. But when you get to that point where we can do everything, and we're all getting there, I mean, we're all working on those concepts, you're absolutely right. Things are going to change, and there very likely will be warehousing and distribution and maybe some manufacturing that there will be no people. There's an old joke about, in the future, there'll be a facility with a man and a dog, and the man is there to kind of supervise the automated system, and the dog is there to bite the man if the man tries to mess with the automated system. So, that's kind of the joke of where this is all going. And likely in the future, we'll have, dark facilities. There won't be people in other than to manage. And with companies like Phantom Auto that are doing things where they can remotely control vehicles, we're not far from that today, actually.
Yeah, well, I just recently published a story about Bosch, which has a chip making facility in Germany, which is obviously completely different from other types of manufacturing. And they say it's basically fully automated. There are no humans involved. Having said that, in the pictures that they supplied, there were one or two people there. I wonder where the dog is now that you've told me that. But yeah, anyway, it's that's a different area, I suppose. But I mean, generally speaking, yes, obviously, I think most people will agree with you. It's going that way. It's humanless or workerless facilities is the trend that we're on, and that's also proved by the fact that Toyota. You mentioned Toyota. I actually kept an eye on them for a while. I knew that at the time they were the largest suppliers of forklift trucks, the ones that are driven by the traditional ones that are driven by humans. And I wondered at the time when they're going to launch driverless ones. Maybe they'd already launched them. It's difficult to find out when things happen, as much as I try and monitor it. But at some point they did launch driverless ones, as I think you mentioned. Yeah, and they're obviously, given their customer base, their large customer base, when they start promoting driverless forklifts, it's going to proliferate that much faster. So yeah, I imagine there's a huge market for this. I mean, I'm just wondering when it will accelerate, because AMRs have been around for quite some time. I know Amazon sort of stalled the market, if you like, by buying Kiva systems.
Eva, sure.
People couldn't buy the system. But AMR suppliers have emerged, yourself, Balyo included. I know you offer an AMR.
We do.
But after a stalled period, when it got going again, it's just gone crazy. It's so many people are interested, and we can tell by the number of people who read stories about AMRs that the market is now absolutely massive.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. When you think about AGV versus AMR, there's a technical reason or a technical description that separates the two, not just the paradigm of size. So the vehicle that you're showing on the screen is a Sherpa, which is our AMR solution. We partner with Sherpa. But the technical description that sets them apart is AGV's path follow. So think wire in the floor, or magnets, or laser, and AMR's path plan. That's the technical description. However, the size paradigm makes a difference as well. So the typical AMR is a very small bot type vehicle that does a very specific application generally. And what makes their growth far faster than the AGV side is, frankly, the cost. So with the proliferation of the Amazon effect and warehousing and distribution, you have to have people who can pick the product that you're ordering. And the AMRs have been growing. That market has been growing because it fits very well into that picking paradigm. So people typically will pick to a bin of some sort, a plastic bin or a box. But they used to walk miles and miles and miles through a warehouse with, it's early on with a sheet of paper. And then, when we had computers and wrist mounted things and pick to light and all those concepts, they could walk to a specific location and pick it without having to have a sheet of paper and a pen to check things off. Well, the concept of AMRs, in that they are simple, they don't require the accuracy or precision that an AGV does. If you think about some of the videos that you saw earlier with an AGV picking a pallet and then putting it on a rack 30 feet in the air, that requires a fair amount of precision. AMRs are traveling in typically 10-foot aisles where people walk. So they're small. They're, for all intent and purposes, intrinsically safe. If they hit you, they're just going to bounce off of you because they only weigh 30, 40 pounds. But they're also very inexpensive, which means that a tote handling AGV, or rather AMR, can be so inexpensive that many companies don't even sell the hardware. The hardware becomes part of the solution. And this is the paradigm that Amazon and Kiva started years ago. So many years ago when Kiva came out, we all kind of looked at it and were like, wow, it's kind of a cool concept, because most of us had roller deck or conveyor deck vehicles, and it sort of looked like that. However, Kiva never really tried to penetrate the market. They came to the market with a solution, and the solution was a picking solution. So this solution set has obviously become very important to warehousing and distribution, because it increases the amount of picks you can get per hour, because it kind of pushes the picking paradigm into a zone pick solution. You keep a person in an area and you bring the motive of the tote to the person puts the product in it, and the robot goes to the next person, or it follows a person along, or those sorts of things. However, since the equipment is inexpensive, they actually sell the solution. So they sell the solution either by a robot as a service solution, so you pay per month per vehicle, or you pay per pick, but they're not actually selling the hardware. And that is an easier concept from a business perspective because of the cost of the hardware. If you go back and look at the VNA truck that we looked at earlier, that's a very expensive piece of equipment. And it's very, very difficult to justify the automation of a VNA truck on just ROI. So you have to have some other benefits as well. However, it's very easy to justify a per pick cost on a piece of equipment that costs you less than $10,000. So if you look at the AMR proliferation, it's the perfect storm. It really is. It's a low cost piece of equipment doing a very simple, from a hardware perspective, not necessarily a software perspective, a very simple application. It doesn't require the many degrees of safety that go into making a truck the size of a VNA safe to operate in a facility. There's still safeties, don't get me wrong, but there's nowhere near the number of sensors that there is in a truck that weighs 10,000 pounds, as well as the Amazon effect, the number of facilities that are going up and the number of pickers that are required. So realistically, what you've done with an AMR of this concept is not only have you delivered a solution that helps you with picking, keeping people in one area, you're also making your picking more efficient with the solution, which means that you do need less people in a facility. So in greenfield solutions, you see a lot of this application, which is good. I mean, we have an AMR solution as well for these specific type of applications too. So we're in this market too.
Mm. Yeah, the AMIs is very interesting. I'm glad you explained that, because I wouldn't have probably known. So yeah, it's always good to people with who can give us insights. And it's made me think about AMRs versus other technologies. I did 1 or 2 stories about AMRs versus conveyor systems, which has been the traditional way to automate warehouses, and that was a comparison that I was kind of dwelling on a little bit. But now you've made me wonder, and plus I've seen stories about what they call micro fulfillment centers. You yourself mentioned earlier about bringing distribution centers or warehouses closer to shoppers, if you like, and the other people are talking about that as well. And the micro fulfillment center is something, a phrase that I've come across quite often, and it's made me wonder what technologies would be most suitable for a micro fulfillment center, because the stories I've come across tend to talk about an automated storage and retrieval system, much like the one provided by Autostore, which is repackaged and sold by people like Swisslog and other companies. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I'll try and work into the video later. But rather than talk about AMRs versus conveyors, what do you think of the pros and cons of AMRs versus an ASRS system that, like the one I'm talking about?
So let's back up for just 1 second, because there's a valid thought exercise there. The Autostore solution, we've seen a few applications recently where we were approached. Well, I say we, this is the greater we, not just Balyo, to provide a solution on the outbound for an Autostore solution that would eliminate the long transfer sections of conveyor, where the Autostore would come out, drop to a bot, and then the bot would go directly to the dock door, so that you would have, 40, 50 or more AMRs that would then take directly into a truck, and you would have the same system filling the truck. However, the bots would then deliver on the dock door. So I'm doing that horizontal transportation for the picking solution with the Autostore. So there is that concept that's being looked at today, where you were replacing traditional conveyor with AMRs. So that's kind of bridging the gap from what exists to a simplified solution. Now, one versus the other. AMRs versus an Autostore. So one is a storage and retrieval system, and one is a transport solution. So how do you create a storage system with a transport situation? Quite simply, if you go back to the technology or the concept that Kiva created, which is the concept of delivering racks to people, so it's still goods to person. So versus, if you think of the paradigm of picking, we talked earlier about zone picking, but another picking solution is goods to person. So if you take the goods to person solution and you deliver the rack to the person that has the appropriate part to be picked. So a person stands in a location and an AMR brings that rack to someone, tells the person what to pick out of the rack, then your AMR becomes your storage solution as well. Your racks obviously are the, where the storage is held, and the AMRs become the motive force that brings them to you. So that concept exists. Do we see a proliferation of it? We're starting to. Companies like Magazino, to some degree Vector Robotics, where they have an AMR solution with a sort of a simplified ASRS on board, a shuttle system and a mast with the ability to pick product from racks and then deliver the bins, again, goods to person. So you end up with a racking type solution with vehicles that are delivering to a picker. You see those already. Now, are they ready for prime time? I'm not exactly sure. I haven't seen any in facilities yet, but I have certainly seen a lot of marketing around the concept. So I think that the solution is building on the AMR concept. So the AMR becomes the motive force, and then the storage and retrieval section is built onto the AMR. Now, the benefit, of course, is that AMRs, as we just discussed, are fairly inexpensive. Now, the infrastructure around that becomes a little more expensive because a shuttle system and a lift system built onto it becomes a little expensive. However, the key benefit here is much like the Autostore solution that you showed a second ago. You can go up. You can actually create a mezzanine solution where you can pick totes from one level and then build another level on top of the racking system. So you end up with what's akin to an ASRS system with vehicles operating on different floors. And that gets you the density that you need, and it gets you the throughput that you need. So the concept is coming. It's coming rather quickly. I mean, you see it. You certainly see the marketing around it. And it gets you the cube, just like what you see in that picture right there. Now, the key is this. Yes, that picture you've got your mouse on. The key vision with respect to the Magazino and I guess the tote retrieval system, the TRS, is that you can physically go in to the warehouse and still pick manually. So there is a fallback solution to that paradigm simply because the totes are resting on standard racking. So if you think about that, that's the benefit of those solutions, because you have a motive force that moves product around, but you can also walk into the storage section if you need to augment. And I think that one of the drawbacks to most distribution systems when you're talking about picking is the fact that they surge. And it has been historically very difficult to make the ROI work if you build the system to meet the surge. So the peak of the peak. So, you think about what happens to the largest retailer at Christmas. They need probably 50% more people than they have during the middle of the year to address that peak of peak. If you design an automated system to hit that number in the summer, you're going to have 50 to 75% of your automated system sitting idle. So, there's a smart concept of being able to augment your automation with manned labor to be able to hit that and still make your ROI work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just thinking how this Autostore concept, which is, as I say, is the Autostore, just for viewers who might not know, Autostore is a company that produces this box-like system. These little robots are at the top. They somehow retrieve items from within this honeycomb type situation. And then they somehow get them down to someone at the bottom to deal with. Now that can be integrated with conveyors, that can be integrated with AMRs, as you said. And it would be interesting to see how micro fulfillment centers develop and emerge.
Well, I've got a view on that, and I think that it's not happening fast enough. And here's my view. And if people are welcome to take this idea and run with it, because if I had the capital to do it, I would do it. Here's the idea: your brick and mortar, what do they call them? Anchor stores in your malls are quickly going away. I see even my small town of, in Charlotte, North Carolina, I live on the outskirts in a small town called Monroe. Monroe Mall is losing anchor stores. Those are very large facilities that could very well support local distribution. So a local distribution could be set up for nearly anything inside those facilities with a minimum amount of infrastructure. And that's where things like this Autostore solution or the Magazino or the TRS could come in. Quickly build up a solution and then have literally, rather than 1 day Amazon Prime delivery, you could have order now and pick it up in an hour, or have it at your house, in an hour, simply because those stores are local, or those facilities are local to where you live. So it's the kind of the concept of going from regional distribution centers to local distribution centers, and now more to these quickly stood up. I don't know what I would call them. Let's call them. So we went from regional to local. Let's call them hyperlocal distribution. So these things could be stood up quite quickly, utilize space that's not utilized today. As a matter of fact, in some cases, it's becoming blight. Let's use some of this space and expand the concept. The technology is already here, but let's expand the concept. It's a great concept, and I think it could be rolled out to every community, because we're losing these anchor stores in these malls and distribution center, or not distribution centers, but malls and outside store kind of faces, those things. Let's stand some of these things up and have hyper local, quick stand up distribution. We could have hour delivery rather than 1 day delivery.
Yeah, it's a very interesting. This is very interesting because I hadn't really thought about it in the way that you're describing it. And yes, some more development needs to happen before we can visualize or imagine how online shopping can be challenged or countered, because it's basically ruined a lot of community shopping centers and high streets because those shops can't compete with online shopping. And the idea of micro fulfillment centers and more efficient distribution networks, more highly automated distribution networks, supply chains, might actually be the answer to this kind of erosion of high street shopping and high street stores. I'm not sure whether that will happen or whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't make any judgments, but it would be fascinating to see how this develops, because yeah, it's very difficult to think of online shopping as the only thing that needs it. I mean, online shopping is great. I do it a lot, but there's a lot of things that I buy and I don't like it. I want to return it, or I bought the wrong thing by mistake, or it's the wrong size, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to be able to just go down to your local store and just change it or get your money back or whatever. I don't
Right.
know how much of a problem that is, the returns aspect of online shopping, but those are things that I imagine are a lot less of a problem when you got your local community stores there for whenever you want to pop in and visit. So it is very interesting, and the AMR, I suppose, is the technology that would, definitely play a part. It might not be the thing. I mean, I do imagine that if you have a local fulfillment center, I mean, I have very limited understanding of the technology, but a lot of these, basically, they have shelf units on the back of them,
Correct.
rather than having a Swiss log style or auto store style fixed infrastructure like this. It might be preferable to have shelf units that can be moved around by AMRs, rather than then you can be more flexible about everything. I'm not sure, but yeah, it is a very interesting area. As I say, it's been growing so fast, and I'm surprised you say it's quite cheap as well, the hardware. It must be because the supply has increased so much. There's more AMR suppliers around. Just a quick question about these names that you use, Sherpa, B, and Linde. Are these names for ranges of uh, products, or were they separate companies at one point? Linde, I don't know what.
So they are indeed separate companies. So
Oh, okay.
especially when you think of Linda, which is a huge OEM for fork trucks in Europe, and in the US, HYG, Hyster-Yale Group, which is the um, chassis manufacturer, the OEM who we work with in the US. So those are actual, so you can buy that truck without the sensor package and guidance on it from Linda today. You can buy the very same vehicle in the US from HYG today, not the Linda brand, but the HYG brand. So those are OEMs, and our go-to-market until recently has been exclusively through those brands. So they would sell our equipment as a path or a channel. So they are indeed, so you see that is a Yale brand. They are indeed an OEM brand that we place our controls on. And I think the benefit of that for most companies is the fact that if at any point something fails, you can always jump on it and drive it. There's always the fallback there. And there's local support. I mean, Hyster-Yale is a huge network in the US. Linda has a huge network in Europe, and a quite large network in the US as well. So yeah, those are individual OEM brands that we put our controls on. It is not the name of the vehicle per se. We have internal names for those vehicles. And the AMR, the Sherpa brand, is a company that we actually partner with. So Sherpa makes those robots for us.
Mm. Okay. All right. Well, it's been really interesting. I just want to ask you one more thing about how you see Balyo developing, and what you see the future being for Balyo, with regards to business and regards to technology development.
Sure. Well, the technology is continuously developing. One of the things that we see a fair amount of, obviously the sensor technology is driving the ability of the trucks to be more universal. So when we talked about the propagation of AGVs as opposed to human guided or human driven forklifts, sensor based becomes more and more important. So one of the technologies that we have now, which is an output of recent development, is our ability to actually see the pallets. We use a 3D camera to envision the pallet when we go to pick it up, which means that we don't have to be, that the person who places the pallet for us to pick up doesn't have to be perfect any longer. We can see the pallet. We can then drive to the pallet, move the forks where they need to be to pick that pallet up. So it starts to take some of the perfection that's required or was required by humans in the facility out of the automation chain. Other things that are coming along, the ability for the software is becoming better and better. The ability for people to put the systems in on their own. The goal for systems is the ability for us to ship these vehicles for all intent and purposes in a crate. Customers will be able to take them out of the crate and install them on their own. So the software is getting better and better there. And then you see things like just the ability for the vehicles to charge on their own. So really what we want to do is minimize the amount of touches that humans have to do with these vehicles. So technology wise, things are moving very, very quickly. And it's becoming the goal to ship them and not have to spend as much time on site. Certainly the technology that we use is far better than the old school AGV concept with respect to time on site and installation time, which drives down cost, of course. But we still want to drive the technology more and more towards autonomous, not just operation, but the ability to install and operate on their own without having a ton of support from anyone in the facility. So things are getting a lot better. As a company, where do we expect to go? Our goal is to kind of propagate the Balyo name in the United States, in North America. We have gone to market through OEMs historically, but we'd like to grow the name in the US as a standalone company with service and support internal. And we're doing that. We've had an office in Boston for many years, and we're growing that office, and we're growing our ability to provide systems internally. Now, we have installed systems for those OEMs, so they were a sales channel for us. We did installations for them as well. But our goal is to become a marquee brand in the US and North America for AGVs and AMRs. We have a great number. We have over 700 vehicles in the field. So we're not a new company by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's a branding situation at this point. Our goal is to get the name out there, put some very good systems in. We're working on a system right now for a paint manufacturer that uses our reach trucks. And the goal is to make a profit out of them. I worked for a gentleman a long time ago at HK Systems and then Dematic, and his goal was to make a profit. And it's not the same profit as you might initially think. It's not PROFIT, it's PROPHET, a profit. So our goal is to have happy customers who at the end of the day will be profits for our company and our technology, which is, I want them to say, Balyo did a good job. This system, this technology works. And if we're going to do this again, we want to work with Balyo. And that's where we're going to go as a company.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting business model. It's different to perhaps other companies you're working with, as I see, a number of partners, and I suppose integrating their technologies into solutions according to what the clients require, as far as I understand it. But yeah, that's it'll be interesting to see how it develops over time, or rather progresses over time. As I say, I've followed this market for quite some time, but it's still so early days because so many warehouses are yet to automate with this kind of technology. And now that lots of people are already doing it, the market will grow much more. So it'd be good to talk to you again at some point in the future and see how things are going for you.
I'd be happy to do it.
Yeah, great. Is there anything that I didn't ask about that you'd like to mention?
I don't think so. I think we covered a broad range of, if nothing else, the market. And I like the ability to have some thought exercise. That's good, rather than talking just about equipment and technology. Sometimes it's good to discuss the overall, what the market looks like and why it's going there. So no, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time and insights. We'll talk again soon. Take care.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Send us an email at sales@roboticsandautomationnews.com to register for one of our many upcoming webinars. And if you'd like us to host your webinar, We have a range of options, including long-term lead generation packages and marketing campaigns. We look forward to hearing from you soon.